I'm Vanessa 32, and I thought I had everything under control. After years of grinding as an architect, I'd built a life. I was proud of my own space, my own rules. But one summer evening, my world tilted. I was at my parents' place expecting a quiet dinner when my brother dropped a bomb. "We're moving in Saturday." He grinned, his voice dripping with confidence. Mom and Dad already approved. His wife nodded, her eyes glinting with expectation, while my parents sat there smug as if it was all decided. I froze. My home, my sanctuary, wasn't theirs to claim. "You didn't even ask me," I said, my voice sharp. My brother laughed it off, saying, "Family shares right." His wife chimed in, "It's for the best." My parents leaned in, their expressions heavy with that old familiar pressure. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about a house. It was about them trampling over everything I'd worked for. When they actually moved into my house, I reached for my phone. My brother's grin vanished. His wife's eyes widened, and my parents exchanged panicked glances. "What are you doing?" my brother snapped. I didn't answer, just kept my gaze steady. My heart raced, but I felt a spark of control return. What happened next? Well, let's just say it wasn't the end of their plan or mine. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up to family overstepping your boundaries. Drop a comment with your story. When did you have to draw the line? Let's talk. Growing up just outside Portland wasn't always easy. I'm Vanessa, and my childhood was a constant tug-of-war for attention in a family that seemed to have one set of rules for me and another for my brother Kyle Ford. Mom Nancy Ford and Dad David Ford poured their energy into Kyle, their golden boy, even when he stumbled. At 7, I'd watch Kyle, 3 years older, break a vase roughhousing indoors, only for Mom to laugh it off, as boys being boys. When I spilled juice once, though, Dad's stern look made me feel like I'd committed a crime. Their favoritism wasn't subtle. It was a fact of life in our small, weathered house on the edge of Portland, Maine. Kyle thrived on their leniency. He'd skip chores knowing Mom would cover for him, saying he was too tired from school. I'd scrub dishes after dinner, my hands wrinkled from soapy water, while Kyle sprawled on the couch, charming Dad with stories of his latest basketball game. By middle school, I was earning straight A's, but my report cards barely got a glance. Kyle's C's, though, earned him a pat on the back and a new pair of sneakers for trying hard. I once overheard Mom tell a neighbor, "Vanessa's fine, she's so independent. Kyle needs us more." That stung, but I swallowed it, vowing to prove I didn't need their applause. At 12, I found my escape in a library book on architecture. The clean lines of blueprints, the logic of buildings, it was a world where effort mattered, not favoritism. I'd sketch houses in my notebook, dreaming of a place that was mine alone. Kyle, meanwhile, leaned into Mom and Dad's indulgence. At 15, he crashed Dad's old pickup during a joyride. Instead of grounding him, they bought him a bike to keep him out of trouble. I walked to school that year, saving my lunch money for art supplies. Their double standards shaped us. I learned to rely on myself. Kyle learned he could always fall back on them. One summer when I was 14, I built a treehouse in our backyard. I spent weeks hammering boards, measuring angles, proud of every nail I drove in straight. Kyle mocked it, saying it was just a kid's thing, but Mom and Dad didn't even come out to see it. A month later, Kyle half-heartedly started a birdhouse project for school, and they spent hours helping him, praising his creativity. I stopped showing them my sketches after that. It wasn't about jealousy, I just realized they'd never see me the way they saw him. By high school, I was working weekends at a local diner, saving for college, while Kyle coasted, confident Mom and Dad would fix his messes. That dynamic followed us into adulthood. Kyle, now 35, married Lisa Ford, a 34-year-old office clerk, and they had a daughter, Hannah Ford, who's 10. Their life's a mess of unpaid bills and shaky jobs, but Kyle still expects handouts, believing family owes him. Lisa, quiet and loyal, goes along with his plans, thinking my success should be shared. I, on the other hand, poured everything into becoming an architect. After college, I landed a job designing homes in Portland, each project a step toward my dream, a house of my own free from anyone's claim. My first big break was a community center project that won local praise, letting me save enough for a down payment. Every choice I made was about standing on my own, unlike Kyle, who still leaned on mom and dad. Kyle's latest plan was no surprise. Struggling financially, he saw my home as his family's ticket to stability, a better place for Hannah, a fresh start for him and Lisa. But it wasn't his to take. The seeds of that entitlement were planted in our childhood, watered by mom and dad's endless favoritism. Back then, I was the kid who learned to fight for herself. After years of hustle, I found my perfect home. Now at 32, I'd spent 10 years as an architect working late, skipping trips, and saving every dollar. My designs for homes and a community center in Portland, Maine, built my name and my savings. When I found a $500,000 house just outside the city, I knew it was mine. I handled the mortgage negotiations, signed the papers, and stood in the empty rooms proud of what I'd achieved alone. This house wasn't just walls and windows, it was my proof that I didn't need anyone's help to make it. I decided to share the milestone with a housewarming party in the backyard garden. I invited mom, dad, Kyle, Lisa, and my niece Hannah, along with extended family, my cousin Ethan Stone, his sister Sarah Brooks, my uncle Mark Ford, and my aunt Diane Morgan. I set up tables with snacks, hung string lights, and played soft music for a warm summer afternoon. During the tour, I showed off the open kitchen and my favorite workspace nook. Ethan, my cousin, praised the layout, saying it fit my style perfectly. Sarah, his sister, snapped photos, smiling. Mom and dad gave quick nods, their compliments brief, like they didn't see why this mattered so much. While we ate in the garden, Kyle leaned in and said, "This place would be perfect for us and Hannah." His casual tone didn't fool me. Lisa added, "It's way bigger than our apartment. Hannah would love it." I forced a smile, but I tensed. Their words sounded like they were claiming my space. Mom nodded slightly, and Dad stayed silent, his gaze on Kyle. I tried to ignore it, hoping it was just talk, but doubt crept in. As the evening went on, Kyle pressed further. "You've got so much room," he said, pointing at the garden. "It's made for a family." Lisa echoed, "Our place is too small. This would be a game changer." Hannah chased a ball nearby, unaware of their hints. Kyle's comments weren't praise, they were calculated. I shifted the topic to a work project, but Kyle cut in. "You're lucky to have all this. Not everyone gets that chance." His words stung, reducing my hard work to luck, and I gripped my glass tightly. Then I noticed more. Lisa lingered near the entry, eyeing the key rack closely. Mom pulled me aside, saying Kyle's struggling. A house like this could help them. Her tone carried that old expectation, like my success was for sharing. Dad said nothing, his silence backing her up. My Uncle Mark and Aunt Diane added vague comments about family sticking together, their smiles stiff. Ethan, my cousin, gave me a knowing look, sensing my unease. Sarah, his sister, tried a joke to ease the tension, but it didn't work. When the party ended, I felt uneasy. Kyle and Lisa's remarks weren't casual, they were testing my limits. Mom's words and Dad's silence confirmed they saw my home as theirs to use. I'd earned this house through years of sacrifice, from late-night designs to every saved penny. As I locked the door, their hints weighed on me. Kyle and Lisa didn't respect my boundaries, and I knew I had to stay firm to protect what was mine. Friday evenings at Mom and Dad's were usually relaxed, but this one felt different. I arrived at their house expecting the usual chatter and home-cooked meal. Instead, the air was thick with tension as soon as I walked in. Mom, Dad, Kyle, Lisa, and Hannah were there, along with Ethan and Sarah. Mark and Diane, who often skipped these dinners, weren't present. I sat down, trying to keep things light, but Kyle's smirk told me something was coming. Before the food was even served, he leaned forward and dropped the bomb. "We're moving into your place next week," he said, his voice smug. "Mom and Dad already said it's fine. Family helps family. Right?" I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. My house isn't up for grabs, I said firmly. It's my home, Kyle, not a crash pad for you, Lisa and Hannah. His smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. Lisa jumped in, her tone sharp. Vanessa, we need a stable place for Hannah. You've got all that space, why can't you share? I took a breath, keeping my voice steady. I worked for that house. It's mine, not a family timeshare. You don't get to decide who lives there. Kyle scoffed, leaning back. You've always been so selfish, he said. This is about helping your niece. Mom's voice cut through. Vanessa, Kyle's struggling. You're doing fine, why can't you help your brother? Her words hit like a slap, echoing the favoritism I'd grown up with. Dad nodded, adding, It's what families do. I tensed, feeling cornered. I've supported myself since I was a kid, I said. I'm not obligated to fix Kyle's problems. Lisa's eyes narrowed. Hannah deserves better than our cramped apartment. You're putting yourself over a child. Her accusation stung, but I held my ground. This isn't about Hannah, it's about you and Kyle expecting handouts. The room erupted. Kyle raised his voice, saying I'd always been jealous of him. Mom called me ungrateful, insisting I owed them for raising me. Dad stayed quiet after his comment, but his stern look backed Mom up. I felt the weight of their judgment, like I was the kid being scolded again. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan, sitting across the table. You're right to stand up. Don't let them guilt you. His support was a small lifeline, but it didn't ease the pressure. Sarah, ever the peacemaker, tried to calm things down. Can't we find a compromise? She said softly. Maybe Vanessa could help in another way. Her words, meant to help, only fueled Kyle. Compromise, he snapped. She's got a mansion and won't share it. I clenched my fists under the table. It's not a mansion, it's my home, bought with my money. You don't get to demand it. Kyle laughed bitterly. You think you're better than us, don't you? Mom piled on, saying I was breaking the family apart. Lisa kept bringing up Hannah as if I didn't care about my niece. I looked at Hannah, sitting quietly, her eyes on her plate. She didn't deserve to be caught in this, but I wasn't the one dragging her into it. You're twisting this, I said to Lisa. I love Hannah, but that doesn't mean you get my house. The argument spiraled. Mom recounted every time they'd helped me, like letting me live at home during college, ignoring that I'd paid rent. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. You're being stubborn, Vanessa. Kyle needs this. I shook my head, exhausted. What Kyle needs is to take responsibility, not take my home. Sarah tried again, suggesting we talk later to cool off, but Kyle cut her off, saying I was the problem. Ethan stayed silent after his text, but his nod gave me strength. The room felt suffocating, their voices piling on, blaming me for standing my ground. By the end, I was done. I stood up, grabbing my coat. My house is mine, I said, looking at Kyle, then Mom and Dad. You don't get to decide what I do with it. I walked out, their words ringing in my ears. They'd crossed a line and I wasn't backing down. My home was my boundary, and I'd protect it no matter what they thought of me. Monday morning felt like any other workday, but that illusion shattered when I heard a truck pull into my driveway. I glanced out the window of my home in Portland, Maine, and saw Kyle, Lisa, Mom, and Dad unloading boxes. My niece Hannah stood off to the side, looking unsure. I stepped outside, my pulse quickening as Kyle pulled a key from his pocket, the spare I'd noticed missing after the housewarming. He strode toward my front door, acting like he owned the place. What are you doing? I demanded, blocking the porch. You can't just show up and move in. Kyle smirked, dangling the key. We're family, Vanessa. Mom and Dad said it's fine. Hannah needs this. Lisa nodded, adding, You've got room. It's for your niece. Mom chimed in, her voice firm. You have to help your brother and granddaughter. Dad stood by the truck, arms crossed, saying nothing but clearly backing them. I tensed, my voice sharp. You stole my key. This is my house, not yours. Get out. Kyle laughed, brushing past me. We're already here. Stop being dramatic. I wasn't backing down. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Ms. Karen Walsh, who'd handled my home purchase. I need confirmation of my property rights, I told her loud enough for them to hear. She confirmed I was the sole owner and advised me to call the police if they wouldn't leave. Kyle kept unloading boxes, ignoring me. Lisa said, Vanessa, don't make this hard. We're family. Mom added, you're being selfish. Think of Hannah. I clenched my jaw. Their words hitting old wounds, but I dialed the sheriff's office. Sheriff Thomas Perry arrived within 20 minutes, his patrol car pulling up quietly. I explained the situation. My family was trying to move in without permission using a stolen key. Sheriff Perry, a calm man with a no-nonsense air, approached Kyle. Sir, you need to leave. This is private property. Kyle's face reddened, his voice rising. This is my sister's house. We're family. The sheriff didn't flinch. Doesn't matter. She's the owner. You're trespassing. He turned to Mom and Dad. You all need to go, or I'll issue citations. Lisa's shoulders slumped, her voice soft but bitter. Vanessa, you'd rather call the cops than help us. I shook my head. You didn't ask, you tried to take. There's a difference. Kyle threw a box back into the truck, muttering, You'll regret this. Mom stepped forward, pleading. Vanessa, we raised you better than this. Kyle needs help. Dad finally spoke, his tone heavy. You're tearing us apart. I stood firm. You're the ones crossing the line. My home isn't your solution. Sheriff Perry stayed until they packed up. Hannah climbed into the truck, avoiding my eyes, and I felt a pang. She was caught in their mess. Lisa shot me a disappointed look, like I'd failed her. Kyle slammed the truck door, still fuming. Mom and Dad lingered, Mom saying, You're choosing a house over family. I didn't respond, just watched as they drove off. The sheriff tipped his hat. Call if they come back, he said, then left. I locked the door, my hands shaking, feeling both relieved and drained. I'd protected my home, but the cost was clear. Their words, selfish, ungrateful, echoed, stirring up years of feeling sidelined. I'd spent a decade building my life, from late nights designing buildings to saving for this house. They saw it as theirs to claim, just like they'd always seen Kyle's needs as my burden. Standing in my quiet living room, I knew I'd done the right thing, even if it hurt. My home was my boundary, and I'd fought to keep it mine. After the sheriff left, I thought things might calm down, but I was wrong. The next evening, while I was sketching designs in my home office in Portland, Maine, my phone buzzed with notifications. Kyle and Lisa had gone live on Facebook, their faces filling my screen as I opened the app. Vanessa's selfish, Kyle said, his voice loud. She kicked us out, didn't care about her own niece Hannah. Lisa nodded, her eyes teary. She called the cops on her own family. Who does that? My chest tightened as I watched their words cutting deep, but I kept scrolling, dreading what came next. The comments section exploded. Mom wrote, Vanessa's always put herself first. It's disappointing. Dad added. She turned her back on family. My Uncle Mark chimed in. Hannah deserves better than this. My Aunt Diane typed, shame on you, Vanessa. Their words drew others and cousins I hadn't seen in years, old family friends from Portland, even neighbors I barely knew. The live stream spread like wildfire, each comment piling on, accusing me of being cold, ungrateful, heartless. I sat frozen, my phone glowing with their judgment, wondering how it had come to this. By morning, my inbox was flooded. A cousin, Rachel, messaged, How could you do this to Kyle? An old friend, Jenny, wrote, I thought you were better than this. Even my great-aunt Clara sent a long text calling me too proud for refusing to help Hannah. The messages kept coming, each one echoing the livestream's narrative. I was the villain, the one tearing the family apart. I felt isolated, like the whole community was against me. Social media amplified their voices, turning a private dispute into a public shaming. I muted my phone, but the pressure didn't stop. Then a message from Ethan popped up. Don't let them get to you, he wrote. They did this to me when I moved out west, guilt-tripped me for not helping enough. You're not alone. His words were a lifeline. He shared how he'd faced similar pressure from mom and dad years ago when he refused to bail Kyle out of a bad lease. "They always pick his side," he texted. "But you're right to protect your space." I replied, thanking him, and felt a small weight lift. Knowing Ethan understood made me feel less like an outcast. I went back to the live stream, now saved as a video with hundreds of views. Kyle was still talking, saying I'd abandoned Hannah for my fancy house. Lisa added, "She doesn't care about family values." Mom's next comment stung most. "We raised her to be generous, but she's chosen greed." Diane wrote, "Hannah's the real victim here." The accusations twisted my intentions, painting me as someone I wasn't. I'd worked 10 years for my home, saving every dollar, designing buildings late into the night. They didn't see that. They saw only what Kyle needed. The messages kept pouring in. A distant cousin Michael called me stuck up. A family friend Linda said I'd hurt poor Hannah. I stopped reading, my hands shaking. The community I'd grown up with now felt like a mob rallied by Kyle's live stream. I thought about responding, posting my side, but what could I say? They'd already decided who I was. I felt trapped, the weight of their words pressing down, making me question if I'd been too harsh. But I remembered the truck in my driveway, the stolen key, their refusal to listen. I wasn't wrong to stand my ground. Ethan's texts kept me grounded. He sent another. "They'll move on eventually. Stay strong." His story about resisting family pressure reminded me I wasn't the only one who'd faced this. He'd left Portland to escape their expectations, building his own life despite their criticism. I leaned on that, knowing someone saw my side. The live stream and messages hurt, but they didn't change the truth. My home was mine, earned through my own work. Kyle and Lisa's public attack was just another attempt to guilt me, and I wouldn't let it break me. That fall, standing in my quiet home in Portland, Maine, I sought help to move forward. The pain from my family's actions, their demands, the stolen key, the live stream still lingered. I started therapy with Dr. Ellen Reed, a therapist known for her calm insight. In our first session, I shared how Kyle's entitlement, mom and dad's favoritism, and Lisa's accusations had worn me down. Dr. Reed asked, "What do you owe them?" Her question made me realize my family didn't respect my hard-earned home or my rights. She helped me see that protecting my boundaries was my priority, not their demands. I left feeling stronger, ready to let go. I stopped answering Kyle's calls, ignoring his voicemails demanding we fix this. Lisa's texts accusing me of abandoning Hannah went unanswered. Mom sent messages, her voice soft. "We're still family." Dad's rare texts urged me to make things right. I blocked them all. It hurt, but Dr. Reed's words stuck. Family doesn't mean endless obligation. By winter, I'd cut contact with Kyle, Lisa, mom, and dad. The silence was heavy but freeing, giving me space to heal. Kyle and Lisa's live stream backfired. Their attempt to shame me turned Portland's community against them. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, commented online, "Vanessa earned her home." "You can't claim it." Others agreed, exposing Kyle's habit of seeking handouts. Their credibility faded, and without my house they struggled. Kyle took unstable jobs, and Lisa's social media grew silent. Their refusal to plan for themselves left them stuck, their complaints ignored by a fed-up community. Mom and dad faced their own consequences. Losing me left them isolated, reliant on Kyle, who couldn't support them. Ethan told me they'd asked him for money, but he'd set his own boundaries. Mom hinted at regret in messages to Sarah, but neither she nor dad questioned their favoritism toward Kyle. Their stubbornness cost them their daughter and a wider family, leaving them alone with their choices. I felt a pang for them, but I couldn't fix their mistakes. Therapy with Dr. Reed became my anchor. She helped me see how mom and dad's support always favored Kyle, dismissing my efforts. My home, bought with years of late-night designs and savings, was mine alone. Cutting contact wasn't loss, it was freedom. I reconnected with Ethan, who understood my choice. Over coffee, he said, "They'll never change, but you can." I built a new circle: work friends, a supportive neighbor, a neutral cousin. I missed Hannah's laughter but hoped she'd understand one day. My lesson was clear: self-respect trumps unhealthy family ties. My home symbolized my independence, a boundary I'd fought for. Kyle, Lisa, Mom and Dad faced their consequences for crossing it. Dr. Reed taught me boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential. I'd built a life I was proud of, and I'd keep it that way. To everyone listening, think about your own boundaries. Have you had to set them with family? What did you learn? Share below, I'd love to hear. Thank you for following my story. Your support means everything. Please subscribe and join me for more stories about standing strong.
"Don't you dare touch my phone, Alicia," Jonathan snapped, snatching his device from the nightstand before I could even reach for it. I stood frozen, the beautiful gift box containing his $5,000 birthday watch still in my other hand. "I was just turning off your alarm so you could sleep in on your birthday," I said, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. "Here, I got you something." Jonathan took the box without even looking up from his screen, mumbling a half-hearted thanks as he carelessly set it aside without opening it. My heart sank. I'd saved for months for that watch, cutting back on lunches and coffees to afford the luxury brand he'd been eyeing. "My name is Alicia Morrison. I'm 25 years old, and this was the moment I realized my 2-year marriage might be beyond saving. Not because of the phone, though his defensiveness was suspicious, but because of the growing indifference that had settled between us like a wall of ice. Jonathan hadn't always been this way. When we met at a tech conference 3 years ago, he was attentive, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. As an IT security specialist, I was used to men either intimidated by my technical knowledge or trying to mansplain my own field to me. Jonathan, a marketing executive for a software company, had been refreshingly different. But something had changed in the last few months. He worked later, checked his phone constantly, and grew irritable when I asked even innocent questions about his day. I told myself it was stress from his upcoming performance review, the one that might finally bring the promotion he'd been chasing. That evening, as Jonathan showered, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Kate. "I need to show you something. Don't freak out," her message read, followed by a screenshot that made my stomach drop. It was Jonathan's profile on a dating app, using a photo I'd taken of him just 3 weeks earlier on our weekend getaway to San Antonio. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Successful professional seeking meaningful connection. Newly single and ready to explore what life has to offer. Newly single? We'd celebrated our anniversary just last month. I heard the shower turn off. Taking a deep breath, I deleted the message and placed my phone face down. When Jonathan emerged from the bathroom, I smiled as if nothing was wrong, even as I felt something hardening inside me. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. And then I would make sure he regretted ever underestimating me. I'd always been practical and methodical, traits that made me good at my job uncovering security vulnerabilities. As the days passed, I maintained a perfect facade while quietly observing Jonathan's behavior like a case study. That $5,000 watch, which represented nearly all of my personal savings, remained unopened on his dresser. When I casually asked if he liked it, he mumbled something about saving it for special occasions without even remembering what brand it was. My mind flashed back to our early days, how we'd stay up all night talking about our dreams, how he'd bring me coffee in bed and listen intently as I explained the technical aspects of my work. I remembered our wedding day, when he'd looked at me with such devotion that I thought nothing could ever come between us. What had happened to that man? Had he ever existed? Or had I simply projected my hopes onto someone who never truly saw me? While Jonathan was at work, I checked his laptop, an action that would have once seemed unthinkable to me. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Though he'd cleared his browser history, he'd forgotten about the automatic backup syncing to our shared cloud storage. Amateur mistake. I found more dating apps, secret email accounts, and evidence of at least 3 active conversations with different women. In one particularly painful exchange, he described me as boring and too focused on her career. When asked why he didn't just leave, he'd written, "financial reasons." Once I get this promotion, I'll have the cushion I need. So that was it. He was using me, waiting until his career advancement before discarding me. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath my pain, something else emerged: cold, calculating anger. I considered confronting him immediately, but quickly dismissed the idea. A direct confrontation would only lead to denials and possibly him accelerating his plans. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to understand exactly what he was planning and gather irrefutable evidence. That night, as we ate dinner in silence, broken only by the occasional ping of his phone, an idea began to form. Jonathan didn't just need to be caught. He needed to experience the full weight of his betrayal. He needed to understand exactly what he was throwing away. "Everything okay with your food?" I asked sweetly, watching him text under the table. "Yeah, fine," he replied without looking up. "Big project at work?" "Something like that." I nodded sympathetically. "You work so hard, you deserve that promotion." He glanced up briefly, surprised by my support. "Thanks, it's been stressful." "I know," I said, reaching for his hand. He allowed the contact but didn't squeeze back. "But things will get better soon. I'm sure of it." And they would, for me at least. Because I was about to make sure Jonathan learned a lesson he'd never forget. I excused myself after dinner, claiming I needed to finish a work project. Instead, I locked myself in our home office and began what I do best: creating a digital alter ego. If Jonathan was seeking connections online, I would give him exactly what he was looking for. First, I needed photographs. I couldn't risk using stock images that could be reverse searched, and using another real person's photos was both unethical and risky. Instead, I utilized cutting-edge AI image generation, carefully crafting a woman who would appeal to Jonathan without triggering his suspicions. Attractive but not model perfect. Professional yet approachable, with subtle elements of my own features subtly altered beyond recognition. I named her Victoria Lawson, 26, a digital marketing specialist, close enough to his field that they'd have common ground, but not so similar that their professional circles would overlap. I created detailed background information, a consistent personality profile, and even a fabricated work history at companies just outside his network. As I was putting the finishing touches on Victoria's dating profile, I heard a soft knock on the door. "Alicia, I'm heading to bed," Jonathan called, his voice lacking any real emotion. "Okay, I'll be there soon," I replied, quickly closing my laptop. When I joined him in our bedroom, he was already under the covers, scrolling through his phone. The $5,000 watch still sat untouched on his dresser, gathering dust. As I slipped into bed beside him, I felt sick at how we could be physically close yet emotionally miles apart. That night, as he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake planning my next steps. The promotion he was waiting for, the one that would give him the financial security to leave me, was scheduled to be announced in 6 weeks. My timeline was clear. The next morning, I launched Victoria's profile on the dating app where Jonathan was most active. Now I just had to wait and see if he'd take the bait. I didn't have to wait long. By lunchtime, Victoria had received several messages, including one from a familiar face: my husband. "Your profile stood out from the others," he wrote. "Something about your eyes seems familiar, like we've met before." A chill ran down my spine. Had I made the AI-generated image too similar to myself? But his follow-up message dispelled my concerns. "Maybe in another life? I'd love to get to know you in this one." I stared at his words, my finger hovering over the reply button. This was my moment to either walk away from this plan or commit fully. Behind me on my desk sat a framed photo from our wedding day, both of us beaming, full of hope and promises. Promises he'd broken without a second thought. I turned the frame face down and began to type. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria and Jonathan developed a rapport that made my stomach churn. Every morning, I'd watch him smile at his phone over breakfast, a smile he never directed at me anymore. Every night, I'd lie beside him, knowing he was messaging my alter ego when he thought I was asleep. "You're working late a lot," Jonathan commented one evening, not out of concern but seemingly annoyed that I wasn't maintaining our home to his standards. "Big security audit," I replied simply. In reality, I was in our spare bedroom, crafting Victoria's responses, carefully building a relationship with my own husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. As Victoria, I was everything Jonathan seemed to want: attentive, impressed by his career achievements, and sympathetic to his complaints. I mirrored his communication style, responded enthusiastically to his interests, and strategically shared insights about her life that would appeal to him. "It's amazing how much we have in common," he wrote to Victoria one night. "I haven't connected with someone like this in years." I felt a stab of pain reading those words. Just 3 years ago, he'd said almost the exact same thing to me when we first met. After 2 weeks of building rapport, Victoria finally asked the question, "Your profile says you're newly single, but sometimes I get the feeling there's more to the story. I've been hurt before, and just want to know what I'm getting into." His response came quickly. "I'm technically still married, but it's practically over. We've grown apart. She's always working and doesn't understand me anymore." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking with anger. So this was the narrative he'd constructed, that I was the distant, career-obsessed wife who'd driven him away. Not that he'd checked out of our marriage, ignored my attempts at connection, and started looking for my replacement while still enjoying the financial and domestic benefits of having a wife. "Why not just end it then?" Victoria asked. "Timing," he replied. "I'm up for a big promotion that should be announced in a month. Once that's secure, I can make my move. Starting over takes financial stability." He added, "I didn't plan on meeting someone like you in the meantime, but I'm glad I did." I closed my laptop, unable to read more. Our entire relationship had been reduced to a financial calculation, a stepping stone on his path to something better. The next day at work, I could barely focus. My colleague, Tina, noticed my distraction. "You okay?" "You've been staring at that same line of code for 20 minutes, she said, placing a cup of coffee on my desk. I hesitated before answering. Tina and I had become close over the past year, but I hadn't told anyone except Kate about Jonathan's betrayal or my plan. "Just dealing with some personal stuff," I said. Tina studied my face. "Alicia, I've known you long enough to tell when something's really wrong. Whatever it is, you don't have to handle it alone." Something in her kind expression cracked my resolve. I told her everything: the dating profile, the watch still sitting unopened, the fake identity I'd created, and Jonathan's admission that he was just waiting for his promotion before leaving me. When I finished, Tina was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What's your endgame here? Collect evidence for divorce?" I shook my head. "That would be too easy. He doesn't just get to walk away on his terms. I want him to understand exactly what he's throwing away, and that I was always one step ahead of him." "That sounds like you have a plan," Tina said, leaning forward. I nodded slowly. "I do now." That evening, Victoria would suggest meeting in person, at Jonathan's favorite restaurant, on the exact day his promotion was to be announced. The day he thought would be the beginning of his new life would instead be the end of the life he knew. As I drove home, a notification appeared on my phone, a message from Jonathan to Victoria. "I can't wait to meet you. It feels like I've been waiting my whole life for someone who truly understands me." I smiled grimly at the road ahead. He had no idea what was coming. Over the next 3 weeks, I meticulously executed every phase of my plan. As Victoria, I deepened my connection with Jonathan, carefully gathering screenshots of every incriminating message. He revealed more than I expected, not just his dissatisfaction with our marriage, but detailed plans for his future without me. "Once this promotion comes through, I'll have enough saved to get my own place," he wrote. "I've already looked at a few apartments downtown." The betrayal cut deeper with each message. He'd been planning his exit for months, all while I'd been trying to save our marriage, working overtime to afford that $5,000 watch he couldn't be bothered to open. Meanwhile, I quietly prepared for my own future. I consulted with a divorce attorney, documenting our assets and separating our finances where possible. I compiled a dossier of evidence, not just the conversations with Victoria, but his other dating profiles and conversations I'd discovered. I wanted to be thoroughly prepared for when everything came to light. One evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Jonathan announced, "I need to work late on Thursday. Big presentation for the promotion." Thursday, the day Victoria had suggested they meet. I kept my expression neutral. "That's fine. Good luck with the presentation." He barely looked at me as he replied, "Thanks. It's important." "I know it is," I said quietly. Later that night, as Victoria, I confirmed their dinner plans at Bella Notte, his favorite Italian restaurant downtown. I suggested 7 p.m., knowing his presentation would conveniently end around 6:30. "I can't wait to finally meet you in person," he wrote. "It'll be a night to remember," I replied, and for once I wasn't lying. The following morning I called Bella Notte and spoke with the manager, Antonio. I'd become friendly with him during the many anniversary and birthday dinners we'd celebrated there in happier times. "Antonio, I'd like to arrange something special," I explained, carefully outlining what I needed. His initial confusion gave way to understanding as I shared just enough of the situation. "I see," he said finally. "This is unusual, but we can accommodate your request, Mrs. Morrison." "Thank you. And one more thing. I'll need a table with a view of the entrance, but where I won't be immediately visible." With the restaurant arrangement settled, I turned to the final component of my plan. I needed something that would make the impact undeniable, something Jonathan couldn't dismiss or explain away. That's when I remembered the watch. For weeks it had sat untouched on his dresser, the ultimate symbol of his indifference. Now it would serve a different purpose. On Wednesday night, while Jonathan slept, I carefully retrieved the watch and its original packaging. I then drafted a note on our personal stationery, my hand steady despite the emotions churning inside me. Thursday arrived with a strange calm. I dressed carefully for work, applied my makeup with precision, and kissed Jonathan goodbye as if it were any other day. "Good luck with your presentation," I said. He nodded absently, already checking his phone, likely messaging Victoria about their upcoming date. At work, I struggled to focus, my mind constantly drifting to the evening ahead. Around 5 p.m., I received a text from Jonathan. "Got out of my meeting early. Great news to share later." His promotion. The final piece had fallen into place. I packed up my things and headed to Bella Notte, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined our story ending, but then again, neither of us was the same person who had exchanged vows 2 years ago. As I handed Antonio the final items for the table, the printed screenshots, the divorce papers, and the box containing the watch, he gave me a sympathetic nod. "Your table is ready, Mrs. Morrison. Everything is arranged as you requested." I took my seat in the corner, partially hidden by a decorative plant, and waited for my husband to arrive for his date with a woman who didn't exist. I sat at my corner table, a glass of untouched red wine before me as I watched the entrance. My heart raced each time the door opened, though I maintained a composed exterior. At precisely 6:50 p.m., Jonathan walked in, 10 minutes early for his date, a courtesy he hadn't shown me in months. He looked different somehow, his hair freshly cut, wearing the blue shirt I'd given him last Christmas that brought out his eyes. He'd even shaved the stubble he knew I liked, but had stopped maintaining, because it was too much effort. The effort was apparently worth it for Victoria. After speaking with the hostess, he was led to a specific table in the center of the restaurant, the one Antonio and I had selected. The table was elegantly set for two, with a single red rose in a vase. Jonathan looked pleased as he took his seat, checking his watch, not the one I'd given him, of course, and then his phone, no doubt looking for a message from Victoria. Antonio approached his table carrying a bottle of champagne. "Compliments of the house, sir. I understand congratulations are in order." Jonathan smiled broadly. "Thank you, but how did you know about my promotion?" Antonio merely gave a cryptic smile as he poured a single glass. "Someone thought you might be celebrating tonight." I watched as Jonathan's expression shifted from confusion to anticipation, clearly thinking Victoria had arranged this surprise. He didn't realize that the only surprise tonight would be his. After Antonio left, Jonathan noticed something on the table that hadn't been there before, a manila envelope placed discreetly beside his napkin. His brow furrowed as he picked it up, hesitating before opening it. I couldn't see his face clearly as he examined the contents, but I saw the exact moment his body tensed. His shoulders stiffened, and he frantically flipped through what I knew were dozens of screenshots. All the conversations between him and Victoria, along with evidence of his other dating profiles. He looked up sharply, scanning the restaurant. I sank deeper into my corner, not yet ready to be discovered. His phone buzzed on the table, a message from Victoria I'd scheduled to send automatically. "Look underneath the envelope." With shaking hands, he lifted the manila envelope to reveal the divorce papers I'd prepared. I'd been generous in the terms, more generous than he deserved, but I wanted a clean break, not a protracted legal battle. Jonathan's face had drained of all color. He picked up his phone, presumably to message Victoria, when Antonio appeared again, this time carrying a small box wrapped in expensive paper. "The final part of the evening's arrangement, sir," Antonio said, placing the box beside Jonathan. Even from my distance, I recognized the wrapping of the $5,000 watch, the one he'd never bothered to open. Attached was a small card with my handwriting. "You'll need this to be on time for your court date." Jonathan ripped open the package, finally seeing the watch he'd dismissed so easily. As he held it, stunned, I stood from my table and walked slowly toward him, each step deliberate. Several diners had begun to notice the unfolding drama, but I didn't care. This moment wasn't about public humiliation. It was about facing the truth. I stopped directly in front of his table. "Congratulations on your promotion," I said, my voice steady. His eyes widened in shock. "Alicia? What is this?" "This is goodbye, Jonathan." I gestured to the papers. "Everything's there. I'm not contesting anything. You wanted your freedom to start over. Now you have it." "You're Victoria," he whispered, the realization dawning on him. "You set this all up." "No, I'm not Victoria. Victoria doesn't exist, just like the husband I thought I had." I placed my wedding ring on the table. "You taught me something important, though. Sometimes what you think you want isn't what you need." "Alicia, we can talk about this," he said, looking around nervously at the watching diners. "You're making a scene." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm making an exit. There's a difference." I turned to leave, then paused, looking back at him one last time. "By the way, the watch is genuine, unlike your promises." Walking out of Bella Notte that night was both the hardest and most liberating moment of my life. As the cool Austin evening air hit my face, I took my first deep breath in months, perhaps in years. No more pretending. No more checking Jonathan's phone or crafting messages as Victoria. No more wondering if I could somehow save a marriage that was already dead. I drove to Kate's apartment, where I'd arranged to stay for a few days while Jonathan moved out. We'd agreed on that much through the divorce papers. He would leave our shared apartment since my name was on the lease. "How did it go?" Kate asked as she opened her door, concern etched on her face. "Exactly as planned," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. He was completely blindsided. She led me to her couch and poured 2 glasses of wine. "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? My marriage had just ended in a carefully orchestrated confrontation. The future I'd planned was gone, Yet somehow I felt like I could finally see clearly again. I will be, I answered honestly. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the restaurant. Jonathan calling, texting, begging for a chance to explain. I switched it off and placed it face down on Kate's coffee table. You don't want to hear what he has to say? Kate asked. I shook my head. There's nothing he could say that would change anything. I gave him every opportunity to be honest, to choose our marriage. He made his choice long before tonight. Kate nodded, understanding in her eyes. What happens now? Now? I took a sip of wine, considering the blank canvas of my future. Now I rebuild. Just me. On my terms. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months, unburdened by doubt and deception. The wound was fresh, but for the first time, I could envision it healing. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, apartment hunting, and rebuilding my life piece by piece. Jonathan had moved out by the time I returned to our apartment, taking only his personal belongings. The $5,000 watch was left on the kitchen counter with a handwritten note. I don't deserve this. At least on that, we agreed. Tina proved to be an unexpected source of strength. She recommended me for a cybersecurity project that not only doubled my income, but also rekindled my passion for work. You've been playing detective in your personal life, she said with a wry smile. Might as well get paid for those skills. I found a small but charming house with a garden in East Austin, something I'd always wanted but Jonathan had dismissed as too much maintenance. As I planted my first rows of vegetables and herbs, I realized how much of myself I'd compromised to fit into his vision of our life. 6 months after that night at Bella Notte, the divorce was finalized. Jonathan had attempted reconciliation several times, his messages evolving from angry accusations to desperate pleas. In his final email, he admitted that losing his promotion, apparently his company had strict policies about personal ethics, had made him realize what truly mattered. But it was too little, too late. I ran into Antonio at a farmer's market one Sunday morning. He recognized me immediately. Mrs. Morrison, he said warmly, then caught himself. I suppose it's Ms. Hayes again now? I smiled. Just Alicia is fine. And thank you again for your help that night. Sometimes people need to face the truth directly, he replied. I hope life has been kind to you since then. Looking around at my new reality, the basket of fresh produce in my hands, the peaceful certainty in my heart, I nodded. Life isn't always kind, I told him. But it's honest when we choose to be honest with ourselves. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I'd received from the end of my marriage. The courage to face the truth, no matter how painful, and the wisdom to build a life on my own terms.